Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we have friend of the show, Dr. Peter Howard. He's going to be telling us on a pilgrimage that you can join him with. But before we get on to that, we're going to talk about a little bit of Garabandal, a little bit of the synod, especially based on our mutual friend Ted Flynn posting his recent article on News from Rome. How does that fit in context with Guadalupe? How does it fit in context with Archbishop Fulton Sheen and even all this mass Muslim immigration into Europe? I promise you there's going to be something a little different than what you may have heard before. There's great context and Dr. Peter brings it in well. So without further ado, let's hand it over to you, Dr. Peter Howard. Welcome back. How are you?
Thanks. Yeah, it's always a joy to be with you. I can't cue in the music that I like to cue in for you. I always got my Scottish music or Braveheart ready to go, but I don't have
Yeah.
that kind of entry behind me, and I don't have that kind of acclaim yet.
Well, you gave me a
So,
nice surprise those few months ago when I was on your channel, the Fulton Sheen Institute. Don't forget to check it out, folks. Had a nice big Braveheart theme just because I'm Scottish, which of course I was very proud of. It was a nice
well,
surprise indeed. But we've got a lot to cover just now, Peter, and you gave me a nice surprise just before we were hitting the record, where our mutual friend Ted Flynn, author of The Thunder
mhm.
of Justice and a great writer, has posted an article on his website, sign.org. May reach out to him as well and see if he wants to do further discussion. He's a good man, and we've had a couple of good ones in the past. But you've read most of what it is, and I know you're going to bring it into the other things highlighted regarding the synod, regarding Garabandal, Guadalupe, Archbishop Fulton Sheen, which of course you will divulge plenty on, and only highlights more of my ignorance until recently, thanks to yourself teaching me so much. But before we get into that, could you quickly lead us in a short prayer, please?
Sure. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. I love this prayer, written by Cardinal Mercier, um, who was also a great influence on Fulton Sheen. He was his mentor for many years, but this prayer really speaks to the heart of our daily mission. And it goes, "O Holy Spirit, beloved of my soul, I adore you. Enlighten me, guide me, strengthen me, console me. Tell me what I should do. Give me your orders. I promise to submit myself to all that you desire of me and to accept all that you permit to happen to me. Let me only know your will. Mary, seat of wisdom, pray for us. Mary, Queen of Peace, pray for us. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen."
Amen. Wonderful. Thank you. So I'm going to hand the reins over to you, really, and whatever you're saying to me out in the raw, I'm going to maybe see whatever questions pop up or add my own commentary. But really, I'm looking forward to listening to what you want to tell us. Are you wanting to begin about Garabandal and the synod news?
Yeah, sure. I think it's fresh. I guess for many it would be breaking unless they subscribe to Signs and Wonders, because I don't know if it's accessible otherwise. But like Ted reached out behind the scenes to me about a week ago with it, and I just only recently had a chance to go through it. And for some, it's this article. It could be a spoiler in the sense of there's so many who like to work off of what they have this their timelines. Now, myself, you say I'm similar to that, but maybe not so much on a micro timeline for me as it is over a period of maybe 5 or 6 years. And anyway, he has an article that just came out in Signs and Wonders. It's you can subscribe to their magazine. I highly recommend it. They're between Ted and his wife Maureen. They're on top of what really is going on, and they often give perspectives of things that you don't hear. So, and Ted he's probably the preeminent expert, I would say, on Garabandal. But his article is titled this: "The Synod and the Prophecy of Garabandal. What is an Ecclesial Assembly?" So, of course, that caught my interest But the gist of the article is the um, the prophecies that surround the warning and the great miracle, and there's several prophecies that do that, that talk about a certain, as Ted calls it, a season when the events are going to take place. And then, of course, you have the one is the warning will it'll happen after a quote unquote synod, and that there would also be another prophecy is that there's going to be great turmoil in the church when that happens. And so everybody's emphasis and focus has been on the synod that we've just had, the synod on synodality, listening to Catholics all around the world, while the rest of us are all praying that they listen to the Holy Spirit. And a lot of flags have come up. But the point is, okay, well, the synod was supposed to be a couple years, and now it went into a third year. As far as the results of it to be released. And they call it an instrumentum laboris, which is the working document that they take from all the observations, and then not just the observations, but when they come together in these various committees, they then synthesize things and they submit them. And then from these reports, whatever you want to call them, from the groups, then a final document is put together that's supposed to highlight what happened, what the main messages were, and where we should go moving forward. Well, this article is interesting because Pope Francis, just a couple of weeks ago, on March 15th, he issued a letter, and it really kind of upended this whole thing of this notion of this synod coming to a definitive conclusion. And it talked about, well, here's the quote. It says, this is from March 15th. It says, the General Secretariat of the Synod announced that it will now start a process of accompaniment and evaluation of the implementation phase of the conclusions of the Synodal Assembly's final document by the dioceses of the world. It will ultimately culminate in the celebration of an ecclesial assembly, whole new title, in the Vatican in October of 2028. So it raises a whole new question. Well, is the synod actually over? It sounds like it's organically been extended all the way now through 2028. October 2028, but it's going to be taking on a new name of this ecclesial assembly. So what was supposed to be an 8-month extension from last October till June, which is when everything of the synod was supposed to be wrapped up, it's now being extended. This is the way at least Ted Flynn explains it, is being extended to October of 2028. Before the Vatican releases all of its findings. So the question is the synod over, since they're now focusing on an ecclesial assembly in 3 years, or is that all one thing, an ecclesial event? And that means that the warning is now going to be more realistic to be put out in October, or somewhere around that time. 2028. It certainly leaves room for a lot of things because of all the prophecies of the turmoil that's supposed to be going on in the world and also within the church that the warning would coincide with. And between now and then, it's pretty obvious that drastic things are going to be changing all over the place because they're happening right now, real time, by the hour here in the United States. Things are changing by the day. Or I should say evolving, but there are changes, but they're evolving, they're calculated, but it has global impact. You still have what's going on in the middle in Ukraine, and then you have the growing tensions going on in the Middle East. Is the United States going to go to war with Iran? This is all serious stuff. And so some might say, well, I still think it's this year. Maybe it is, I don't know. But Ted seems to be kind of a spoiler by the end of his article, basically saying or hinting at that 2028 seems to be the new target. If that's the case, it would be interesting because of those who, like yourself, myself as well, uh, who like to work out as best we can what looks like a timeline. I mean, there is a general timeline that I think most of us agree on of what events will follow what events. The warning, great miracle, permanent sign, and then a period of chastisement upon the world after that, which most likely would be the rise of the Antichrist during such a chastisement. And the church could be driven underground, especially because people are worried about this ecclesial assembly. Many think one of the big things that's going to be used for in this implementation is going to be the shifting of the language of the liturgy from a sacrifice to a celebration. The words of consecration would therefore could change, invalidating the Eucharist. A lot of these things. And it doesn't seem like, in a certain sense, they're not. Rome is not on track to be making any of those changes anytime soon. So that would certainly be the great apostasy in full effect. The apostasy is underway, but that would be the abomination, the great abomination, when the Eucharist then is changed. So anyway, it's interesting because then if that was the time, then 29, 30, let's see, 28, 29, 30, and 31 could probably be the years of the Antichrist. Why that is interesting to me is because I have seen, maybe shifting into the next topic, and of course I'll just be quiet for a minute. I'd like to get your comments, but shifting into the significance of 2031, juxtaposed to 2030, because 2031 is the 500th anniversary of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and it's also not on the church's public calendar, but on, according to, for example, Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, who saw the life of Christ and whose private revelations from our Lord on the life of Christ have a lot of credence behind them. She's considered a great mystic in the church. Point to the actual calendar of the year 31 AD actually being the year of redemption. So it'd be really interesting. The church probably wouldn't celebrate it in 31 because our calendars, I forget which one we're using. Not the Julian, is it? No, not the Julian, the Gregorian. Anyway, would probably have us a 33, but by that time, we would have gone through the massive anniversary of Our Lady of Guadalupe and all the significance that the history of Our Lady of Guadalupe has, that I would love to talk about after this in a minute, has for the church and the world at that time. I don't know. It's interesting. It kind of puts it, for me, 2028 could very well be right in the midst of the time of the Antichrist. And it would be perfectly in line with if there was something like a change, an abomination of the Eucharist, that during this time, 3.5 years, would bring us to the end of 2031, which is December 9th. So I find it very, very interesting, this article, because I know a lot of people, a lot of the messages today seem to be going, it's imminent, like it's this year, it's like going to come in a few months. Watch what happens in Ukraine and a third world war that breaks out and expands. And right before it's about to go nuclear, something's going to happen, and something celestial, what will coincide with this, and the warning will happen. And then that would probably move the timetable up of certain things, of course, if that happens. But I don't know. It's interesting because if Ted's right, it kind of, I don't say puts into question, but to a certain degree it does. Well, what are the things that we're hearing today? Are these valid, or is this the fruit of prayer, or is it, like Ted says, reminding us from the prophet Isaiah? My ways are not your ways, and my thoughts are not your thoughts. So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are from that.
Yeah, there's a lot there. The first thing I thought of when I was looking at Ted's article here on the second screen, the an ecclesial assembly is almost it's changing its name from the synod because it's gone on so much. But the early writings of Garabandal, speaking about the warning, spoke about how it would coincide during a great ecclesiastical event. So that's been mentioned in the early books in the early days as well. It wasn't always the synod, but an ecclesiastical event, or as an ecclesiastical event.
Mhm.
Potato,
Yeah.
potato. But so yeah, it kind of made me think of that. There's definitely something that's going to happen within the church that coincides with it. Is it what's going to come as an accumulation of all this stuff where so many people have been involved? I mean, the hope is the Holy Spirit's still in charge, guiding the church. The fear is that so much input from all over the world, from so many people, if it's anything of what I seem to pick up amongst normal, average people in the community, at the parish, church, they don't seem to know everything about why the church teaches the way it does regarding contraception, IVF, pro life, pro choice, all this type of
Hmm.
stuff, gay marriage, and all the rest of it that we've seen change in the world rapidly in the last
Hmm.
25 years or so. So it's like, what's their input? What's going to Rome from all these dioceses, all these parishes filled with so many sheep and goats, so to say, where the darnels mixed in with the harvest? Because there's definitely that for sure, there's no doubt about it. Um,
Hmm.
so it's interesting in what's going to come of that. The other thing I'm thinking about as well is after 2033, it's anyone's guess. To my knowledge of all that I know, I don't see Trefontane in 1947 apparitions having a significant impact to make a century of 2047. It's the only one I know of to take it further. Then you're talking 1960 to 2060 because that was the deadline for the Russian conversion. Uh, Our Lady of Fatima said because by 1960 everything would be more obvious, Lucia said. So that's going too far with a lot of things. But when you look at where we're at right now, this present moment, the last numbered pope in St. Malachi's list was Benedict, actually, Gloria de Olivia. There's this mystery around about who is Petrus Romanus. Is it Francis or is it a pope to come? Because Francis, as we know, has been at death's door for the past few weeks at least. Is he going to
Yeah.
make it to 2028, to 2033? He's,
2026.
he's going to be close to 100 by then, So it's like he comes at the time of Anne Catherine Emmerich, as you mentioned, blessed Anne Catherine. The prophesied two popes. Coincidentally, in a third level, as I keep repeating on the channel, we had the four popes since John the 23rd, according to Garabandal, including the short reigning pope. Those four popes were Benedict. Then the Guadalupe 46 stars, 46 popes, all ending at Benedict. So Francis seems to be in a bit of the limbo in terms of the mystery. Is he Petrus Romanus or is that the one to come? And when you tie it in context of the years we're in and what we're approaching soon, you've got the Great Reset of 2030. You can see why many things are happening in the continent here for that. Um, but then 2031, as you highlighted as well, has been with the older calendars. It's the 50th anniversary of Medjugorje. It's the 70th anniversary since the apparitions began in Garabandal. It's the 100th anniversary of Divine Mercy since the first
Ah,
one.
you got it. I was waiting for that one.
Then it's I'm doing it in order, the 200th anniversary of Rue de Bac with the Immaculate
Hmm.
Conception on the Miraculous Meadow, which she linked up with Guadalupe amazingly the first time we spoke. And then it's the 500th anniversary of Guadalupe. And when you look as well with Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, she had the vision where Jesus was 31 years of age, teaching the scribes how the calendars were off, and it was
Yeah, it was. He
4022.
was 31 years old in the year. um, in the year
4028.
2028.
Yep.
And so when you do the math of so you would think if he was 31 in the year 28, well, when he was 33, then it would be the year 30. But he turns 33 in December. He's not, and then so it goes into the next year. So that puts it puts him at into 31 for the redemption,
Hmm.
because he's born December 25th. This doesn't take, it's only like 6 days, and then it's the new year. So it goes right into, the year 31, where he would have, where the crucifixion and redemption would have taken place. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the church will probably, a lot's going to happen, and what's going to affect the church's decisions, I don't quite know. It works off of its own calendar, like the Jubilee of 2000. It wasn't celebrated in 1998. um, so, but it's like that's like the climax of everything, you can say, because of all the things that seem to be in place for that to happen. And like you were saying too, with all these anniversaries, and then there's also things that you know better than I do, but there's things that the visionaries have said from various apparitions. They're going to be alive during when these things begin to
Yeah.
take place. And you got Conchita, who's what, 78 or 80? I don't know how old she
About
is, but
78 or something.
yeah. So you have, I mean, there's just a lot of things that point still to this, obviously within this framework of where we are in 2025, and at least 31. Um, I tend to think 31 has, like you were saying, with all those other dates, with some of those I hadn't considered carefully, but for me it was the divine mercy of 100 years, because Our Lady talked about the time of mercy followed by the time of justice. That rhymes with me more than anything else. That would begin in 2031. The final justice and purification of the world that would lead into the era of peace. But I don't know.
There's a lot
I'm not going to
happening on
claim
it.
anything these days, but it seems, to use the theological phrase that always covers you. It seems to be pointing very strongly toward 2031 as being the most significant time, especially in light of evil. Evil's agenda is to be over by 2030. So, UN Agenda 2030, World Economic Forum, that's all aimed at 2030. And they're trying to speed that up. But like the United States now has put a huge wrench in that. And everybody has their own opinion about the United States, and its role. I tend to be more optimistic or positive, but it's going to have to coincide with a massive conversion that will take place, not just through economics and politics and military.
Well, that might be a bridge into the next part on my mind, Peter, because sometimes the algorithms on social media can pop up short videos or other videos or posts, and it shows you a lot of bad stuff happening with normal people on their phone cameras recording a lot. So people are losing, it's coming across like people are losing what it means to be nice and charitable and courteous. But you're getting a lot of videos showing the craziness of the migrants in terms of
Mm-hmm.
no respect of law, and you're trying, and other things going on there. But there's so much, and it starts twisting the mind, because at the end of the day, we as Christians are saying everyone is loved. The invitation is for every single person to convert to Jesus. We are never going to bring violence on someone to convert. But many people are concerned about what it is we're bringing into our own countries, especially here in the UK, and quite honestly, most of Europe, Western Europe. And but if you go against the grain, you're a racist. If you go against it and speak up in a way of concern or what's wrong with it and why you don't want it being the way it is, then the establishment will try and make you out to be the bad guy, and we're
Oh
seeing
yeah,
it a bit.
especially where you are. It's
Yeah,
extremely,
absolutely.
it's extremely Orwellian, of all places, in England. And I was just looking the other day, and how it's not even hidden, but tougher prison sentences given to whites It's like it's not white are white men. It's like it can't be any more specific about that. So it's interesting because there's going to be a clash. I mean, there already is. I mean, just today I saw France, was it France and Spain? Now have big demonstrations that have been
Yeah,
launching
same in England again. They're
in
more.
Muslim areas too, but because these countries have more Muslims than there are Christians, but saying that we are a Christian country. Well, they were, and now they're basically becoming the minority, and they're so secularized that it's really, really small. But everybody in the midst of this awakening realizes that they have to choose a side. And so, and this is where a lot of the older prophecies become.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking more ancient classical ones that always speak of the Mohammedans, the Islamists, or different words, and how ultimately there's going to be a religious war that takes place between Christians and Muslims, and it's because they're all going to be all over Europe already. But something will trigger it to a whole new degree, and we begin to see that now as things are awakening, and the people are trying to reverse their government's course and get people in there who are going to do that, but they're not even allowed to vote for them. If you look at Romania, they've completely removed Georgescu, who was like a landslide leader in the votes and the polls and all of that. And the EU steps in and says, you're not even eligible. And then European
France with
countries
Le Pen?
Le Pen, yeah, exactly. Now she's imprisoned. So the Europeans are waking up to a reality that they should have known for over 20 years now, but they're realizing our own governments don't rule our country. The European Parliament is unelected and it answers to no one. And now it's just dictating to the countries. So that's why you have countries looking at the United States in certain respects saying, we're pulling out of everything right now. We pulled out of the World Health Organization. We pulled out of the World Trade Organization. That was huge. I'm almost certain we'll be pulling out of NATO sometime soon.
That's the one.
And yeah, and I'm completely for it. I know others might not agree, but I'm absolutely for that. It doesn't serve our interests, especially when Europe is marching into a greater war with Ukraine, and they're going to invoke Title 5 or whatever it is, paragraph, whatever it is. And but we have our own issues with Israel and Iran, and we basically are doing Israel's. We got to break that tie as well. But it's the clash of civilizations has been engineered. It's been set up. So it's now beginning to happen between Christians and Muslims. The globalists over all of these things are the ones who are basically moving the things as they want. For them, they want it all gone in the end, but they're happy to use a clash of civilizations in order to do their bidding. So they do it by mass migration. Countries lose their identity. Then you add in Europe, you have they've contracepted themselves into extinction. They can't even replace themselves, and the Muslims don't believe in that. So Gaddafi was right. He says we don't have to really go to war with Europe. We'll just outpopulate you all, and you're nothing you can do. And they're kind of waking up. I forget what saint it was, Saint Augustine maybe, but it was like. Or St. Athanasius. It was like he woke up one day and he said, and the whole world became Aryan overnight. Well, Europe's waking up and realizing that it's Muslim because Christians are the number one persecuted group of people, and nationalists, those who are citizens who love their country, are now the ones that are being locked up, canceled, removed from eligibility for voting. It's a big, big deal. And so we're just seeing now the next major shift because of what's happening in America. And yeah, I always tell people you need to wait and see, but we need to pray, because in the end, if we don't find the soul of our countries, if we don't return to our roots, and Europe has explicitly Catholic roots, the United States doesn't have Catholic roots. We have to find our Catholic roots because it precedes 1776. We were founded, we have the missionaries on the west, you've got Junipero, and then on the east, you have the North American martyrs, the Jesuits. People don't realize the Catholic nature of our land here in America. The Mississippi was called the River of the Immaculate Conception. It's like our country is deeply embedded into the mystery of the Immaculate Conception, which also gives me great hope, because everything that we talk about in all these Marian apparitions of the modern world all speak to one thing. This is the age of the Immaculate Conception. It was implied in 1531 by Our Lady of Guadalupe, Genesis 3:15, the woman who crushes the serpent, the Aztec name that many scholars say that would have been Cuatlacuazupe, which means the woman who crushes the serpent. Her posture is almost identical, as you would see, to Our Lady of Lourdes, where she says, "I am the Immaculate Conception." But before Our Lady said that, in 1847, the United States was consecrated to Mary under the title of the Immaculate Conception, before it was a dogma and before Our Lady said it in Lourdes. So there's a connection that we have in a very special way to that. And the Immaculate Conception goes all the way to Genesis 3:15. And Our Lady of Guadalupe speaks to that. And Our Lady of Guadalupe is the woman clothed with the sun. So she's also, Revelation 12, she bookends the entire Marian age that we're in. So from 1531 to, let's say, 2031, it's this 500-year cycle. Fulton Sheen talked about that a lot. He says the church works in 500-year cycles. And God always gave a heroic pope to lead us during those times, during the times of transition. We had Gregory the Great, Gregory the Seventh at the turn of the first millennium. Then we had Pius V in the 1500s. And then Sheen's pointed to John Paul II, who he said would be known as one of the greatest popes the church has ever known. And he's now called the Great by many, including myself, leading us into the time in which we have now. And we're marching toward 2031, which would, like I said, whether that is the 500 marker or not, it certainly is for Our Lady of Guadalupe. And the significance of Our Lady of Guadalupe, the more you dive into that, beyond even just the things that are fascinating, the 46 stars and the things in the imagery that the Aztecs would have seen, the history is, people need to realize Our Lady of Guadalupe was instrumental in the founding of America by Columbus. One of the last places Christopher Columbus went, and where he signed all the documentation for his voyages and got the funding, was the monastery in Spain of the original Our Lady of Guadalupe. And that story goes all the way back to St. Luke, who wrote Mary's Gospel, you can say. The Marian Gospel is St. Luke. The statue that's in Guadalupe, Spain, Our Lady of the Divine Maternity, is one that was, the tradition has said that it was carved by St. Luke. And then it was passed down as a gift to St. Gregory the Great, who then gifted it to St. Leander of Sevilla after a very famous battle that he had. And this is in the 8th century. And then you have where this Marian devotion taking place, but then the Muslims come in, the Moorish invasion, and it gets buried in a cave nearby next to what the Spaniards called the Guadalupe River, because it was the Wolf River, and it has different possible, there's different what would you call it? Translations for what that would be, because it would be like Guadalupe would be like how it would sound in the Arabic, because it's an Arabic word that they used, and it means stuff from like the Wolf River. It means it means hidden river. It means river of the core, river of the heart, river of love. It has all these different translations. And so the statue became known not just as Our Lady of the Divine Maternity, which you see later on in Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City, but it was Our Lady of Guadalupe based off of where it was found. And so it had a connection to the Muslims as the Reconquista took place of Spain, all the way out, through the Iberian Peninsula back through Europe, this became really prominent. And as we know, like I mentioned, Columbus went to what was later in the 14th century. You had the construction of a monastery that was built there. It became later known as the Royal Monastery. It became a place of Marian pilgrimage in Spain. And of course, like I said, that's where he went and got the approval, signed the documents and the funding for his voyages to go and explore. So Our Lady of Guadalupe became associated with the exploration, the explorers of the time. It embodied, it was a symbol of divine guidance. It was protection of the explorers, missionaries, because missionaries would always go with them. And then Cortez, right before he went to Mexico to really end up, fighting the Aztecs, that had to be done because they were just so demonic and they were militant. And what they did, they had to be defeated both physically, militarily, and then eventually spiritually a few years later by Our Lady of Guadalupe. But he actually carried with him, he had an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe from Spain. And so it's really interesting how you have Europe united to the Americas through Our Lady of Guadalupe, but you have Our Lady of Guadalupe going all the way back to the gospel itself, the gospel of St. Luke, or the apostle Luke, Luke the evangelist. And then you begin to see, wow, Genesis 3:15 to the gospel of St. Luke, to then the apocalypse that's revealed in the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, it's all wrapped around this. And within this is the mystery of the Immaculate Conception, as I mentioned already, because she appeared on December 9th, 1531. And that was at that time, that was the feast of the Immaculate Conception. So this is why this is all these pieces start coming together. And we're looking at the era of peace and all these things. With the Immaculate Conception, of course, then you have the Immaculate Heart of Mary being emphasized at Fatima. And Fatima has a connection, to the Muslims. Fulton Sheen said, well, why would God choose a place that's named in honor of a name that would be shared with Muhammad's daughter? It was a Catholic who married a Muslim woman who left behind. And in her honor, he named it Fatima. But that's the name that, of course, is Muhammad's daughter. And in the Quran, it speaks that there is nobody who is greater as a woman over Muhammad's daughter Fatima, except Mary. Mary is given more praise and acceptance among the Muslims than our Lord is, and that's why she's, as she would call her, she would be the Trojan horse to get into Muslim areas. Like he always used the example of Mozambique. They wouldn't allow Bibles. They wouldn't allow exterior signs of Christianity. But for whatever reason, they allowed a statue of Our Lady of Fatima, and she processed down the street. And he said, no sooner had they done that, processed Our Lady, than people started becoming Christian. So Our Lady of Guadalupe is so interesting of how it's all of salvation. Jesus is the Alpha and the Omega. And you can say the maternal Alpha and Omega that precedes the coming of Christ in the beginning and in the end is our Blessed Mother. And so that's why for me, this is so important. And of course, we're making a pilgrimage there in August. But I was like, and I wondered why. I've been so fixated a lot on the things of Europe, but it's like a kind of like a rainbow, or a ray of light that's then segregated through the Marian prism. And you see all the different beautiful colors, but they're all part of the same light. I think that prism more and more is looking to be Our Lady of Guadalupe in its deepest significance, historically, theologically, spiritually, and in the time of we need a reconquest of Western civilization. Well, everything's pointing now to Our Lady of Guadalupe. So I know that was a lot to throw out there in a kind of a fire hose, but it's overwhelming, the divine precision and connections that God is, I think, giving now on Our Lady of Guadalupe.
I think for me as well, though, you mentioned the key word salvation there, and I want to I remind myself again of Father Malachi Martin's interview in the late 90s. I think it was 97 maybe. I've got it in a slide somewhere. But when he was interviewed, who he himself, known the third secret of Fatima, says that the final solution would be Kiev in Russia back then. He specifically mentioned Kiev in Russia, and there's a bit more to it, but I remember that because obviously 20 years later or so, it's happened, and it's still ongoing to the point where does it go next? And we know with other prophecies it gets wider spread over Europe, but at the same time, Islam rises, doesn't it? And we're seeing that in the making. The stage is being made. But like you say, it's the globalists, the puppet masters allowing all this, all the, playing the strings on the puppets. What I find myself doing sometimes is I need to bring myself back from all the videos and all the talks and all the concerns, even legitimate concerns, because we need to be careful we don't fall into the trap of opposing them and everything, because then there is division, isn't there? There's one thing of being patriotic, there's another thing of having concerns of what does this mean for the culture, what does this mean for my own faith and freedom of it at home. And we're seeing already how this is clashing and the government's allowing it. But we need to be careful, especially as Christians, that we don't fall into the trap of being so opposed that we hate them, that we want to be violent, that we want to be uncaring. Like some people are fleeing for their lives, maybe, but you hear others saying that's not the main story, that's not it. And I'm like, well, do you know a lot of these prophecies are telling us this is happening? So it's one thing to get into what's happening in reality, what's happening before our eyes. But then I remember that quote from Father Malachi Martin about this final solution with Kiev and Russia, which ties into all this with Islam and other prophecies. But he says, if you ask me how God would have planned to bring it all better, this era of peace, he says, I would never have thought salvation would come from the east. But that is the plans of divine providence, that is divine wisdom. So it's like, although we're seeing this stuff with concern, we're seeing this stuff clearly like it's been prophesied, and it's going to get much worse. But today I'm thinking, how do I stay back in a good place with it all personally? It's like, salvation from the east is arriving. That's how I'm trying to say it to myself. Because when the great warning comes, when the great miracle happens, even after the persecution, even after the great war and all the misery that's going to come, the Muslims, the Jews, all the Christian denominations, atheists, they're all going to be coming into the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. That's the salvation from the East for this era of peace. They're about to have their Damascus experience in a grand scale. I mean, would you agree with that? Would you disagree after those quotes as well? It's just trying to watch from the human point. I don't get
Yeah.
caught in the trap.
Yeah, I agree. The saying that salvation will come from the east. Um, I lean heavily toward the same conclusions of Saint Maximilian Kolbe and even Fulton Sheen himself, who saw specifically the salvation that will come from the east will come from Russia. Russia's conversion, which is the only conversion that's prophesied, by the way, people don't realize that Russia will convert. It's just a matter of how soon but it will be massive. Whether it's pre-warning or after the warning, I don't really know. But I just pulled up a quote from Sheen that speaks to the hope and the destiny of Russia and for the church and for the world. He says, this is a quote, he says, when Russia does receive the gift of faith, its role will be that of an apostle to the rest of the world. It will help bring faith to the rest of the world. Why should it be the means of evangelizing nations of the world? Because Russia has fire. Russia has zeal. God could do something with the hate of a Saul by turning it into love. He could do something with the passion of a Magdalene by converting it to zeal. But God can do nothing with those who are neither hot nor cold. These he will vomit from his mouth. So that's Sheen. And then you have St. Maximilian Kolbe is another one, my favorite. He's also one of the patrons of our institute. He says, the day is not far off, nor a mere dream, when the statue of the Immaculata will be enthroned by her knights in the very heart of Moscow. And I think we've seen this attested to just historically, and even in the present, where modern empires go to die. They go to Russia. Napoleon made that mistake. Hitler made that mistake. And Europe is about to make that tragic mistake. And, like you were saying, a lot of people kind of get connected or attached to positions because of maybe just how much they hear of one side and they think that has to be the right side. I always tell people, you got to be really careful. You have to know your history and you have to know the facts of what's really happening. Like Sheen would say, right is right if nobody's right, and wrong is wrong even if everybody is wrong. So we need a church and an authority that's right, not when the world's right, but one that's right when the world is wrong. Well, I think that speaks to us right now. And the history of Russia and Ukraine, people need to understand that. They need to understand what's been going on for over 10 years. With the civil war that's been taking place within Ukraine itself after a democratically elected leader who was very friendly with Russia, wanted a good relations between Ukraine and Russia, and was removed by the West, primarily the United States. We're disasters when it comes to regime changes, and they never, ever go well. So the war that was going on just since that time against Eastern Ukraine, which is predominantly they all lean Russian, in the Donbass region, so you have the governments of you have the government of Russia, and you have the government of Ukraine, and then you have the people of Ukraine, and they're very different. They're valiant people. They have a strong Catholic background. They've suffered so much under Stalin. They've suffered in the entire modern era. There might not be a country that has suffered under so many different regimes than they have. But like we're always talking about, who's driving this? Who's driving this? And the truth is now beginning to come out for people, even on whatever political side of the spectrum you are beginning to realize what the real truth is, because it can't be hidden. Even the New York Times, which is like, a newspaper that hardly get any credibility because they've gotten so many things wrong by choice, deliberate. But now they finally have like this, I don't know, super mega page article that just goes to show that the United States was involved in the Ukraine war against Russia, for a long, long time, like from the moment it started, let alone just financially, even troops. We're just being governed by deception, and we have to be able to see through that. And the only way to do it is through prayer and to also study and know the truth of these things. Otherwise, we find ourselves on the wrong side, not just the wrong side of history, but today, to be on the wrong side of truth is to be on the side of falsehood and lies. And we know who the father of lies is. And he's not just a liar. He's what? Those lies, they lead to death. He's a murderer. And so, anyway, the salvation from the East is, I definitely see. I mean, Russia's much further along that path than anybody else is in that region. And I could see in the midst of all this reunification through Mary. I definitely see the conversion of the Muslims. Fulton Sheen certainly did. He said it was precisely what I was talking about. He talked about we need to understand why God would choose Fatima, so that our Blessed Mother would be known till the end of time with a special title, Our Lady of Fatima, that was speak to a special relationship and a hope that exists for the Muslim people. who actually, who do revere her. I know people who wore miraculous medals, which you would think, oh my gosh, that'd be a death wish. It was the one thing that they would actually come up and touch because they don't allow images. They don't, but they knew was the Blessed Mother, and they, I don't know, veneration would be the right word, but they spoke very positively about wearing the miraculous medal. So I know this person, well, now deceased, but uh, they had a place in Ephesus in Turkey, and these things would happen in Muslim countries. So, we need to be detached from all these preconceived notions of this side and that side. We need to be focused on what's right and what's wrong, and how that applies to each of our own countries. What the United States is doing now, in many ways, I see as being right. Some of the things that they're doing are wrong, and it's not like, oh, now I'm a traitor. No, a true patriot is one who takes responsibility to change what's wrong in a country, while also fighting for the things that are true and honorable for its people. And this is where Catholics have to step in. And that's why our countries go to these ends that they end up just completely crashing in, is because the heart and the soul was never really there. And Europe is finding that out the hard way by abandoning their Catholic roots.
Yeah, I mean, they're coming at a time when we are weak in many ways. After the pandemic, especially, numbers have never went back to being the same in the churches, which is going to have more effects when it comes to money or future generations keeping the faith. So, yeah, it's coming at the time when the West is definitely weak. But something, going back to those dates, 2031, 33, afterwards, it's anyone's guess. The way things are at right now, it's going to burst at the seams within the next year or two, I think. It can't go 7 or 8 years the way it is, and nothing's going to happen. It's going to burst quickly if it keeps going the way it's going. There was one of the Lords in the House of Lords and the UK Parliament last year said, he stood up and said, if we keep going in the same trajectory as it's shown right now with the data, white British people will be what was the word, Aboriginal minority by within 15 years or so. We will be the minority. Indigenous, sorry, that was the word. I always get mixed up with that word. I always think of Australia with these words. Because when I heard we will be the Indigenous minority within 15 to 20 years. So,
Yeah,
but
politically a lot faster than that.
yeah, well, it's already shown that thanks to the Labour Party, that's for sure. Um, but this is what's causing so much society, like the tensions in society, the division is increasing. And sometimes I do find myself getting a little frustrated or annoyed with so called good people, Catholics, even the clergy. They're completely oblivious to the amount of stuff we're speaking about from the prophetic side of things. And it's all about social justice, which has its place. But what about the divine things that matter? Why? I mean, their church, from going back to ancient Judaism, our Bible, it's founded on prophecy. The coming of Christ was founded on prophecy. And I think someone was telling me a couple of months ago, it was a Father Ian Utsi that said, and I'm taking it from someone else that told me this. They said the church had to rethink its approach to private revelations, for the fact is the church, we know everything as we do from the first coming of Christ. We'll have our Bibles. Prophecy should be in the blood in terms of knowing where we're at and where we're going in the church. But it keeps getting a little, oh yeah, we'll look into that, we'll investigate it and let you know. And now with the new norms in place since last year, I can see the flip side of it, where it is an undermining when none of them will ever be declared supernatural. Medjugorje get the nihil obstat. There was five other options that were worse, but they gave it the best of what they could give under the new norms. And that means that Fatima, Guadalupe, if it had to happen right now and beyond, it would never get supernatural. So there's an undermining of
Yeah,
everything from heaven is an undermining, you know, from
yeah.
the
I thought about that with the whole these new like lexicon that they're using for to remove approved apparitions. Um, I'm sort of the mentality now of, and I have been probably for a while, that it almost doesn't matter. People might say, how could he say that? Oh my gosh, he's one of them. No, and that by now almost everyone is kind of on a side. Medjugorje has been around a long time, and the word is spread everywhere. And whether it's I mean, I guess a level of approval would be big, but I don't know if they ever really could have actually approved it, only because there's secrets that nobody knows that have to happen to validate it. And I think that that's a legitimate. I mean, I've always seen it like that, so that's why I was like, well, even if they came down negative on it, we're at the point where the number of conversions that have come through that are most likely not going to change. And then secondly, it's these ones that have specific secrets attached to them, they're going to validate themselves, like Garabandal as well. It's never going to get a formal approval, but it could, as long as it's not a negative decision, that it's known constat, that it's not supernatural. I think we're so close to things now, and they kind of have played their course through to a certain degree. And yes, I understand. I would certainly prefer as it was, and that bishops would still make up, um, have their own inquiries and make their own decisions. Um, but it helps some, and it hurts others. In a certain sense, the new requirements helped Amsterdam, Our Lady of all Nations, because that's gone from imprimaturs to a local approval, to then it's not back and forth. But the imprimaturs still exist on a number of things of it. So one can say, because that's like one I remember, like Dr. Mark Miravalli, it's a huge one for him, and it's the latest official, I think, position came out saying it wasn't supernatural and almost taking things away. But I think, now with these imprimatur nihil obstat kind of thing, not the imprimatur, the nihil obstat, nothing's obstructing it. One could put an argument that gives it more credence once again, that he could be, using that. Um, I don't know. I just think that the major ones right now that aren't approved, I don't want to say they don't need it. As long as they're not gone against negative, they have a movement of their own, and the fruits are very well seen. And then you have, like I said, their secrets. How can you formally approve something? Because I mean, I guess you could approve the messages, I mean, ahead of time, but there's the supernatural. What is the word I'm looking for? Supernaturality of it would tie into whether these secrets are real. Someone would have to know them. And they're like, well, we can't tell them until it's like 7 days out. And so it's like they're going to authenticate themselves. And they keep saying, too, by that time, it's almost too late anyway to convert. So I just think that that's why the things that happen now, uh, a tree by its fruits. And when people ask me about things, my conversion began right before I went, but really was given a divine boost when I went to Medjugorje in 1990. And I've never really had a trip like that in my life. I mean, I was young, I was a high school punk, but I was open to things. I was already praying, but that touched me. Like I entered another realm of another level of the drama. Like either this is fake or this is real. And if this is real, what she's saying is true, then I better rediscover and re-examine everything about how I understand the world, how my own faith, and where I should what my place is in all of this, because this is the most incredible time to be alive if this is true. So I don't know. I don't
yeah,
know. I don't know what that what that
yeah.
means for many, but that's how I see it.
I
And
think
as I'm not a
once,
Mariologist.
yeah. No, I think you're making a good fair point there. It's just I think it's so obvious to what we're seeing though, and it is just a matter of time But where we're at now can't keep going the way it is. Something's got to give in the next year or two, and it is completely orchestrated
Mhm.
and organised. And for the Brexit that happened, it's even worse now than it was before we left the EU. So, yeah, it's still the puppet masters, but they might have their great reset goals, but God's got the divine reset ready, you know, and salvation is coming from the east, and I think we need to keep that hope. But you mentioned there about your trip in Medjugorje in 1990. I'm just cautious that we've hit the hour mark. You've got the pilgrimage coming up then, isn't it? And this is where we should be grabbing our faith and getting out there to apparition
Yeah.
sites and churches, and especially this year of Jubilee. So, what's happening there?
Mhm.
What would you like to say to people?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for allowing me to mention that. I have my little card right here. If you have our little, there it is. You can just go to our website too, just Fulton Sheen Institute.com, and it's right there on the homepage. But yeah, it is one of the big pillars of the Jubilee year. You have the indulgences that are offered. You have the passage through the holy doors, and then you have a call for pilgrimage. And pilgrimage doesn't necessarily mean you have to go to the most extraordinary place that's out there in the world. There's a lot of designated places for pilgrimages, but one of my dreams has been recent years, especially as I really discovered something that I still wonder why there was such a veil over Our Lady of Guadalupe in all of my studies and reflections, um, until just recently in the last couple of years. But it was Fulton Sheen that kind of put that when he died on December 9th, it hit me because I was like, one of his great sayings that I quote all the time. So if you watch me on any podcast, I'm probably bringing it up. But he says, God doesn't do anything in history without the greatest finesse of detail. Once again, why send Our Lady to Fatima? So to be a connection to the Muslims. Why send Our Lady to Guadalupe, a place that has Muslim history, but also has a history that takes us all the way back to the gospel, or to the Saint Luke the Evangelist, and the Mother of Divine Maternity. And then so almost a millennium later, she appears in Mexico City, in the very heart of the Americas, and she is what? She's pregnant. She's the Divine Maternity, and she's also revealed herself as Our Lady of Guadalupe, uniting the old world and the new world. And we've already just went through all of this. So I'm not going to rehash it. But I began to think, Fulton Sheen, he prayed every day of his life, he said. Yeah, I have the audio clip. It's really popular. I pray every single day of my life that I'll drop dead before our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament on a feast day of Our Lady. And when he died on the 9th, I thought, oh my gosh, like, how could God not have given him that? But then I realized, of course, just praying about it and being detached from my own desire to want to manipulate God and his history was, oh my gosh, that's the perfect day. Because that was the day, the original day of the Immaculate Conception in the East. Didn't enter our day on the calendar until later on. It's still celebrated on the 9th in the East, in the Byzantines. I was just talking to a Byzantine priest yesterday from Washington State, just about this. And so we see this convergence of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Fulton Sheen, his feast day is December 9th. December 9th is the Immaculate Conception. The Immaculate Conception is we're in the era of the Immaculate Conception. The United States is in a pivotal moment of its history. In one sense, our old history is over. We can't go back to the way things were because they failed. They brought us to where we are now. And there are some things that aren't exactly correct to say making America great again. We were great in charity, in philanthropy, but we were never great in the way European countries were great because of their Catholic faith, their contributions to Western civilization like that. We defended freedom and all these things for sure, and we have been a beacon of that for so many. But you could say sometimes it's referred to as the American experiment. It failed. I mean, we were one vote away from institutionalizing communism. How in the world do you get to that unless foundations were never there? They weren't strong enough. So Our Lady Guadalupe brings us back to where we need to go and yet it points to where we're going. And with Fulton Sheen in the midst of this, Our Lady of Guadalupe is the patroness of the new evangelization, especially of the Americas. And so Fulton Sheen is now, by divine appointment, he's mixed into this mystery of the new evangelization and Our Lady of Guadalupe, as if, what do we have to learn from him? He's more than a modern day St. Thomas Aquinas. He was a man who knew the world and where it was going, a true prophet for our times. And yet he had the spiritual emphasis of the daily holy hour as what he said was the number one way to defeat the demonic. And so Guadalupe, or Mexico City, was for me. I was led to having that as a destination, and then it was like, Lord, give me a good chaplain. We were blessed to have in the fall Father James Blunt, Society of Our Lady of the Most Holy Trinity. And I simply asked, I prayed, and then I asked his superior if he'd had permission to do it again, if he wanted to. And I got that permission. And he had a lot of other things going on and offer. So it was a huge act of providence. And we have a fellow pilgrim from the fall. Her name is Vicki Smith. She has a healing ministry, Upper Room Ministries. God's using her in extraordinary ways. She's in Ireland right now. All of these things came together to what I believe is going to be a very, very powerful pilgrimage from August 2nd to the 9th. And it's unique as a pilgrimage, too, because every morning is dedicated to formation. We have 60 to 90 minutes. I don't know the official length of that yet. We're working on it. Where we have a spiritual conference. And then that's followed by a holy hour, a daily holy hour while we're there, because that's a big thing for Fulton Sheen, is that really the daily holy hour revolution. And then in the afternoon, we visit the holy sites. Of course, I wanted to emphasize as much as we could the shrine itself, having been there once before 2 years ago, not even 2 years ago, and just soaking it in as we're learning the history, things that we're talking about here, as we're entering into the mystery, as we're putting it into prayer every morning, and then in the after lunch we'll have mass. And then we have the holy sites, and then we have fellowship together. And this kind of repeats every day to different places. I think it's a one-of-a-kind experience when it comes to a pilgrimage. And so it's an honor for me to invite your audience, those who can, to join us. It's been filling up, and we only have reservations held of rooms because the accommodations are always the challenge. Right. Until May 16th. So if you're looking for a pilgrimage to be on that, I believe will definitely be life-changing, no matter where you're coming from. I think this is one that's worth praying about, and then simply going to our website, fultonsheeninstitute.com, and it's there on the homepage. You'll see, or you can just put, I would just go to the homepage and then click on it, and then it'll take you there. But everything that we're talking about is going to be really powerful because you're part of something that's living. Yeah. The image of Our Lady of Guadalupe has been declared by scientists. They say this is a living image. This separates, among all the miraculous reasons that separate it from, other tremendous relics within the church, this is something that they're saying is still alive. There's a special presence there. So we have Mary, we have the Eucharist, we have. It's really surreal that then to be there and then to have the knowledge that we'll be focusing on, rather than when you leave and then you're like, oh, now that I know all these things, I wish I had known this before. Now I want to go back. You're going to have that while you're there. So when you have time by yourself and you're praying, you just sit there. You can be on Tepeyac Hill. You can be in front of the image, wherever. But when I was there, I was there for 10 days, and I felt like I was just now entering in by the time I left, because I was reading and studying with my daughter. And now it's an honor to be used as an instrument to bring a pilgrimage myself there, and to have such a leadership with Father Blunt and the ministry of Vicki Smith to be with us. So, because we'll offer opportunities for to learn about healing prayer, to be praying for healing and allowing the Holy Spirit to work. St. Paul specifically speaks about followers of Christ and having among the list of gifts is the gift of healing. So they're real. This is why I always have some criticism about the so-called traditionalists. Is like they just throw all of that out. And so the devil wins. He's so notorious about this, and that's why people who leave the church is because of usually like one experience, one thing, and then they just throw the whole thing out. And we're not living in 1965 or 62, whatever year they want to use, or the late 50s. The John Paul II era is still yet to be fully discovered, but yet we've been given so much to chew on. Him, Venerable Fulton Sheen, and then all these the insights that God gives the prophets of our times, and I would say the theologians, true theologians of our times, those who contemplate these mysteries within the light of the faith, can then help give those penetrating insights that will inspire others. That's why you have Mark. I mean, you probably never talk about it. Mark is studied in Rome, same university that I was at. Mark, I love being on your show because it's you bring a depth that's always there that simply comes out by what you say, but many people might not realize that. And that's important to a certain degree, just because using our intellect for truth is one of the noblest things we can possibly do. And to help articulate that to people becomes a responsibility. And that's why, Fulton Sheen, who had all these super doctorate things, and it was like his grace was that combined with divine wisdom, the gift of wisdom, allowed him to communicate complex truths in the simplest of terms. And I think to the extent that we do that, we exercise and participate in that wisdom. Otherwise, we're just kind of clanging cymbals, I guess, as St. Paul says.
Yeah, for sure. Well, there's a lot of stuff there, food for thought, for sure, Peter. And everyone's watching, if you're thinking about that pilgrimage, think of going with Peter, Father Blunt, and others. Check out that website. I'll leave a link in the description box below. Last word of advice to the audience, Peter, before we wrap up.
Make a daily holy hour. There's a whole other episode we can do just on that, but the saints of our times are defined by what we do in our life of devotion to our Blessed Mother and in relation to the Holy Eucharist, just like the two columns of St. John Bosco's dream. And what I believe is the greatest contribution of Sheen spiritually, and I would say his greatest legacy, is calling in a time of war. He'd always say, what are we doing now that is anything different than in a time of peace? And if people don't realize that the battlefront, at least I'll speak from an American standpoint, the battlefront isn't overseas anymore. Okay, it's not outside. The battlefront is the home front. Or you can simply say the home front is now the battlefront. It's in your homes. It's in your marriages. It's in the things that are right there. And Fulton Sheen was really strong that we are up against something demonic, intrinsically wicked, and it won't listen to us. He says, while we stand or while we sit, but only when we are on our knees, fasting and praying before our Lord, and as he would say, and making an hour before our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament. While we can, this is a very powerful way, and I just encourage you to look this up. I have it with me, but look up, I think Jesse Romero posted this up where he read it. All the things, many things that demons have said that were recorded by Father Gabriel Amorth regarding Jesus' true presence in the Eucharist. And they just talk about how just a few moments of silence before the Lord in the Blessed Sacrament completely unravels their plans in so many areas. The reasons to make it are enormous, but remember this as we now get ready for Holy Week and Good Friday, Holy Thursday evening, is the one thing that Jesus directly asked. The only direct appeal he ever made to his apostles and disciples was, Could you not watch 1 hour with me? That's my appeal to you. If you haven't started doing it, start tomorrow morning and make that hour. It's the hour that made Sheen's day. It's the hour that's made my day. And if you're going through hard times and you want discernment, Jesus, I promise you, if you are faithful to this, he will guide your gaze. You will see things clearly. You will see things simply. You will realize in the end, only one thing matters, and that is him. And we need to see him as he sees us. That will change how we view everything. And this whole prophetic world that Mark and I are always engaged in, it all comes back to that. So those are my closing words.
Brilliant, thanks, Peter. Yeah, I can double on that as well. That's where everything changed for me in life as a young 19-year-old boy or a young man, was killing time waiting for the bus. I decided to get into church one day, and although being a cradle Catholic, former altar boy, adoration was on, and I just spent a few minutes. Then I left. Then the next day I says I'm going to go back in there. Then the next day. Then the next day. And within 6 weeks, I went from 15 minutes a day to 2 or 3 hours per day. I couldn't get enough of it, the peace. And that's when everything started coming. And here I am 20 years later. So get your hour,
There you are.
get to adoration as much as possible, folks. The Lord knows how to change us for the better. And I love one of my favourite quotes right now is from St. Catherine of Siena. Be who God meant you to be, and you'll set the world on fire. Love it.
Mhm.
Love it.
I love that quote.
Well, on that good note, then, after everything else, folks, don't lose hope. Don't lose the faith. Don't give in to any fear. Take it as an invitation, if you have that, to focus more on the Lord in prayer and fasting, living the gospel, living the messages our Blessed Mother's telling us to live. And don't forget to give us the thumbs up, like, and subscribe. The links below from Dr. Peter will be in the description box. And until next time, take care and God bless.